So looking forward to letting rip here on the things I got to offer. I'm just going to jump right into it. This is the farm I grew up on in Massachusetts. My parents met living in the city, but my mother grew up on a farm in Illinois. And when they started having kids, she said, "We're not raising them in the city." So they found a piece of land on a dirt road and built a house. This was 40 plus years ago. I don't, pepper wasn't a word, but we called it homesteading. When you've got a root cellar and you've got a milk cow and you got a wood stove and you got all kinds of animals and vegetables and fruit and you put them all away for yourself. It's kind of like how things used to be. So it was a mixed farm. My parents, like a lot of farmers, couldn't make a living, so they had a day job. When they met, they were community organizers, and so they on the land, you know, like how can we be community organizers here? Where's the culture we want to be working with to bring people together? And this was in the early '80s, and there was this nascent organic farming movement that was just sort of coming together in New England, in the Northeast, and they helped to found an organization called the Northeast Organic Farming Association. My mother she ran the organization for 35 years, the state chapter. My father was the editor of the newspaper for the 7-state organization, and they ran the annual conference for 30 years. So I grew up with one foot on the lands, farming, homesteading, another foot sort of actively involved in the food movement. And that's sort of my context, where I come from, my perspective. When I, always, all year long, working on the farm, in college, come home, work on the farm in the summertime. In my 20s, managed the farm in the summer. Then I got to go travel the world and do fun stuff in the winter. When I got married, I had figured out no other way to make any money, and I had found no better way, I thought, to raise a family. So I tried to emulate that dynamic with my parents did. Both parents at home, not too many screens, community, elders, music, meals, sort of living life. And that's the point when I realized that I, like my parents, couldn't make a living farming and had to really focus, because I had a wife, I had a couple of young kids, and I was, I didn't want to get a job. I didn't want her to get a job. I wanted to actually live a quality life. And so that's when I started reading books, going to conferences, attending seminars. This is almost 20 years ago now. I found this network, Acres USA, which some people may have heard of. I call it the mothership. There's this word, regenerative, that's going around right now. Regenerative is like a little 5-year-old toddler in relationship to what Acres has to offer, the biological ag perspective. They've integrated biochemistry and microbiology, along with organic and permaculture and agroforestry, along with indigenous traditions, along with the whole quantum, multidimensional side of things. It's a big tent where a lot of people for a long time have been cross-pollinating and sharing and working with farmers and working with nature to get results. So there at those conferences, reading those books, attending those seminars, I learned things I never learned in the organic world, and started putting pieces together and started experimenting. It took about 2 years, study in the winter, practice in the summer, to get to a point where I was literally making my living farming, working 20 hours a week. Actually, when you work with nature, and you actually work with nature, things work more well. Your cost of production does go down. Your pest and disease resistance does massively improve. Shelf life, flavor, aroma, nutritional caliber of food improves. It's like you can make a living farming and still have time to play with your kids, which for me was just absolutely revolutionary. At that point, basically, I felt an obligation to start talking about it. And so I started giving workshops at the conference my parents ran, and that turned into courses at sort of places like this, actually, educational facilities regionally in the Northeast, which turned into long-form, year-long courses. I founded an educational organization called the Bionutrient Food Association in 2010 because of this demand for this practical farmer knowledge that we were experiencing. It was sort of spreading through word of mouth across the Northeast and other parts of the country. Um, and our focus was on the nutritional caliber of food. There was one thing I'd learned about at Acres in whatever it was, 06, 07, one of those first couple of years I was there, was about Brix. Has anybody heard about Brix? Refractometer? This simple little thing that cost $10 brand new. It was invented in the 1830s, and you can take a garlic press and this little thing, and you can take a leaf and squish it, and you can see how healthy your plant is, if it's going to be susceptible to insects and disease. What? I never heard about this. You can use it 10,000 times, there's no battery. Like, it'll give you real readings. Like, just because the leaf is green doesn't mean the plant's healthy. Just because you're alive doesn't mean you're healthy, right? There's a difference between full vitality and dead. There's a continuum of health, and that's the case with most of our plants. Like, if you're really healthy, you're not going to get sick. Not a lot of our plants are really healthy, and they get sick. I call being eaten alive by a flesh-eating fungus not a sign of health. Anybody? Systemic staph infection? If your kid had an arm with a systemic staph infection being eaten alive, you'd say something's wrong with my kid. When you've got powdery mildew, which is a flesh-eating fungus, eating your plant alive, you're like, yep, that's normal. How about if you had flies laying eggs on the hind quarter of your cow, and those eggs hatched and those maggots were eating your cow alive? Would you say something's wrong with that cow? Larvae eating a plant alive is what we had happening on our farm every year. Colorado potato beetles show up, make babies, they start shredding those leaves down to the little nub. That's just the way it was. Larvae eating my plants alive. I didn't realize that even though I wasn't using chemicals, didn't mean my plants weren't healthy. The reason I couldn't make a living was because my plants weren't healthy, because nature was coming in and taking them out because they weren't fit. When I actually had this taught to me, and I was given the tools to measure and monitor, and the understanding about how to give nature what she needs so the plants could actually be healthy, that transformed my whole life. The other thing about this Brix thing is, it's not just about the leaf of the plant that you can squish and get a reading to see how healthy the plant is. You can also take the part that you eat. You can take the carrot and take a chunk out of it and squish it and get a drop of juice and get a reading. It'll tell you how nutritious that carrot is. Anybody ever had a tomato from the grocery store in January? Anybody ever had one from the garden in August? Right? God gave you some really sophisticated nutrient monitoring systems called noses and tongues. When you eat a tomato and it doesn't taste good, that's nature, God, whatever you want to call it, telling you not that good. When you eat a tomato with flavor, who's eating a peach ripe off a tree? Anybody? Pick the ripe peach, take a bite out of that? That's not what you get on the supermarket shelf. The government tells us all tomatoes are uniform, all potatoes are uniform, all milk is uniform, all beef is uniform. Right? They all have the same number on the back of the package. Not true. Not true. Actually, that connects to your health, connects to the health of your children. If our bodies don't have in them what they need to function well, they start falling apart. When you're 2, 3, 4 generations into food that's being grown with a lot of chemistry to make it big, because that's what the farmers get paid for, is volume, not quality. Right? Who's ever had, I don't know, cows that you had make baby cows and then make more baby cows? Right? Anybody pay attention to the health of the mother? Like who's your breeding stock? You want the healthiest animals? What happens if you feed your breeding stock poorly, and then you feed their children poorly and you keep reproducing? Those animals don't perform. That's where we're at right now. As humanity, eating what we call food, and most of it's junk as far as I'm concerned, You shouldn't put junk and food together. That's like saying alive, dead, or wet, dry, or day, night. Junk food. There's food over here, there's junk over there. We're literally building our bodies, our children's bodies, out of junk, and they're falling apart. And that's why Maha is a big deal. Maha is a big deal because people are like, you know what? I'm not okay with my kids being sick. So anyway, with this refractometer thing, what I learned was you could actually measure the relative quality of food. There is massive variation between this milk and that milk, this rice and that rice, these potatoes and those potatoes from a nutritional standpoint, which connects to the health of my children, which connects to the health of my plants, which connects to the bottom line of my farm. That blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. This is amazing. Who's talking about this? Who's talking about this? The organic people, we knew we were better. Our stuff is better, everybody else is bad. Local people knew they were better. How about permaculture? Permaculture, we knew. Biodynamics, who's heard of biodynamics? Damn straight, we're God's greatest gift to the planet. Everybody knew they were better. It's kind of like Presbyterians and Methodists and evangelicals and Buddhists and Muslims, and everybody's got their church, and we're God's chosen people, and those the rest of them are infidels. Right? From the food movement, I was raised in the church of organic, and we were better. And we sold our crops at the farmer's market, and we were local, and our noses were properly elevated. Properly elevated. We were better. Until I got a refractometer out, and I realized the reason I couldn't make a living was nature was telling me you're not. Nature was telling me you're not better. So humility has got to be a foundational place to start. When I learned about all this stuff, I said, what's the word for this variation in nutrient levels in food? All the elders in the circle I was traveling in at Acres said, well, the Brix refractometer is what we use to measure, but we don't have a word for it. I'm like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had a word for this variation in nutrient levels in food? You can't talk about it if you don't have a word for it. So we came up with the term, nutrient density, again, almost 20 years ago now. And so that's the title of this presentation, nutrient density. The organization that I founded, the Bionutrient Food Association, you can see the little logo there in the top left corner. This used to be the front page of our website. Our mission we established was to increase quality in the food supply. We didn't want to be dogmatic about we're regenerative, which that wasn't the word back then. We're organic, we're local, we're agroecology, we're permaculture. We said it's the quality of the food that matters. If you're a farmer, the whole point is to grow food, not to grow commodity, right? That's your responsibility. Your God-given responsibility for your community is to provide food for their children. And what we've been conned into by the system is selling commodity. So our thought is, if we can create a dynamic where the ambient level of nutrition and food for everyone on the whole planet, not just US, because we're all God's children, we're all human beings here. We want the ambient level of nutrition for all humans on this planet in the food supply next year to be higher than it is this year, and 2 years from now to be higher than it is next year. We want to increase quality in the food supply. That's our mission and our vision. Again, founded in 2010, started off as an educational organization, giving workshops, giving courses. I'm going to do a short 1 hour, highlights reel of the 2-day course that I give this afternoon. If anybody finds it compelling, all you have to do is type in my name on YouTube, and it's there for free in multiple versions. Our work has been to foundationally educate farmers about how nature evolved plants to work. For a long time, right? On which of the first 6 days did God invent fertilizer? Anybody? I don't think God invented fertilizer. I think plants have been growing in nature for a long time without the use of fertilizer, insecticide, fungicide, and herbicide, actually to great systemic benefit to all life. How does that work? How is it that plants grow in nature? Anyway, that's been the course. I call it Principles of Biological Systems. How did nature evolve things to work? We do courses, we do workshops. We started an annual conference. Every single presentation at every one of our conferences has been recorded and is available for free on our YouTube page. So there's a wonderful, I mean, anybody who drives tractors too much and you get bored, we got hundreds of hours of presentations from all kinds of people for the last almost 15 years on our YouTube page, if you want to just go down the rabbit hole. We're an educational organization at the core of it. But what happened was, as we would give a workshop in an area, I'd say to farmers, don't take my word for it, find a corner and experiment. If it's true, it'll work. And if it works, it'll spread. Farmers would do that. They'd find a corner, they'd experiment. They'd try a couple of things I talked about, like, oh, wow, what's going on? I'll try a little bit more next year. And they tell their friends. And I get invited to go from Massachusetts to New York, from New York to Ohio, from Ohio to Colorado, from Colorado to California. Got started spreading around the country and into other countries and other continents, these courses. And pretty soon we're finding, didn't matter soil type, didn't matter climate zone, didn't matter scale, didn't matter crop type. Wherever you work more well with nature, things work more well. And so we got to thinking, look, if we can improve soil health, we can improve ecosystem function, we can improve farm viability, we can improve flavor, aroma, shelf life, nutrient levels. We think we can improve human health just by working with nature. Isn't this the kind of thing that should spread? And then the question became, how would you spread it? And our thought was, we use this very powerful thing in culture right now, which is called money. If we can align the economics, if we can make it more economically advantageous for farmers to work with nature, they will. How would you do that? Our thought was, most people have families. A lot of people have kids. At some point, people, when they have kids, they realize there's nothing more important than the well-being of their children. So if we can help people understand that there's nutrient variation on the shelf, that this tomato and that tomato are not uniform, this potato and that potato are not uniform, if we can help people understand which carrot, which blueberry, which milk, which beef is better and worse on the shelf, they might choose the better and leave the worse. And if we could do that, if we could do that one thing, if we could help people choose the stuff on the shelf that's more nutritious and leave on the shelf the stuff that's not, that will pull through the supply chain an incentive for farmers to focus on nutrition instead of volume. So that's been the grand vision. We've been working on it for almost, well, it'll be 9 years now. The first question was, how would you give people the ability to test? How would you give people the ability to know? And I don't believe, even though my parents wrote some of the first organic standards in the US 40 plus years ago, I don't believe in certification labels. I don't believe in black and white. I don't believe in bureaucracy. I don't believe in marketing. I don't believe in sales. I believe in actual science and truth. So how do we give people the ability to actually know right now, of the blueberries you've got, which one's better, which one's worse? Of the steak, of the burger, which one's better, which one's worse? Well, there's this science called spectroscopy. People may not have heard about it. I learned about it in college. There's this thing called the Hubble Space. Anybody hear about the Hubble Space Telescope? It's up there. I'm not sure how many miles up there. It takes pictures of stuff way far away. Apparently, they can take a picture of the atmosphere of a planet 10,000 light years away. You know how far a light year is? It's a long way. 186,000 miles a second? It's the speed of light. The Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 that took off in the 70s, the things that have gone the farthest of anything we've ever sent, has been going for 48, 49 years, will be one light day away next year. And yet we can tell what the atmosphere of a planet 10,000 light years away is made up of with this science called spectroscopy. That's kind of cool. What does it mean? How does it work? Why is it pertinent to carrots? Spectroscopy says anything in chemistry like a copper or a zinc or a protein. You've heard about copper and zinc and protein. You think about them as things. In physics, they're actually vibrations. Copper vibrates at a certain frequency. Zinc vibrates at a different frequency. Protein, there's different kinds of protein. They all vibrate, and that vibration is light. So if you look in the right spectrum of light, you can take a picture of the frequency of light, the color of light coming at you from something, and you can see what it is. This is what spectroscopy is. They've been doing it for a long time. So our thought was, if we can take a picture of something 10,000 light years away and see what it's made up of, why can't we take a picture of something a millimeter away and see what it's made up of? So that was the vision. This was the harebrained idea 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 years ago. Can we put in people's hands the ability to, with a flash of light, see if that carrot's better or that carrot's worse? So we started this project, and we're a nonprofit. We're an educational organization. We run on charitable donations. Everything we do is open source and in the commons. I am not a company. Everything we've done, everything I'm going to tell you about is open source. The engineering, the app, the data, everything's in the commons for the global commons. So A, can we build a handheld consumer-priced flash of light nutrient meter that you can see the quality of food with? That was the first question, and most people said, no, that's Star Trek, not possible. Second question was, is there a meaningful variation in nutrient levels in food? Because when we went to the land grants up where I'm from, in UMass and Cornell, they said no. Nutrient variation is 2%, 5%, maybe 10%, but all food is pretty much uniform. The third question was, if nutrient variation does exist, if it's significant, what causes it? Our thought was maybe it had something to do with soil health. People at the university said G by E by M. Anybody heard about G by E by M? Genetics, by environment, so it's like soil type and climate, by management, like I tilled, you didn't till, I used this fertilizer, I didn't use that fertilizer. G by E by M is what they teach you in the university, is what are the causal factors in plant health, etc. We had reason to think there was some other things going on. So I'm going to lay out for you now in the next few slides the research we did in our preliminary work, 2017 to 2021, and then we'll proceed forward to where we are now. First thing we did was we raised enough money to build a meter. We built a little handheld, I've got it over here, piece of kit. Anybody heard of the Apple II? Back in the 1980s, the first personal computer? Did anybody ever see one? It's like this big. You can play Frogger on it, right? It's not an iPhone 17, it's an Apple II. This is an Apple II. This is a first generation, built in a garage, not exactly, but kind of. There's screws in here, it's 3D printed. Okay, 2017, raised enough money to build a first generation handheld flash of light meter. 2018, set up our first lab. We said to people, we want to know the variation of nutrient levels in food, so please send us in samples of food. That year was just carrots and spinach. We said we want it from the grocery store shelf, from farms, from farmers markets, from Michigan, from Montana, from Massachusetts. We want organic, we want not organic. We want people to send in food from the supermarket shelf, from the point of purchase. Wherever you would get your carrots, just send them in. Just carrots and spinach that year. We looked at the nutrient levels in the food. Second lab year, 2019, we set up our second lab at Chico State in California, and we had 6 crops that year. We added, I think it was grapes and cherry tomatoes and lettuce and kale maybe. We had the farmers not just send in the crops in triplicate and the consumers sending stuff off the shelf, but the farmers, we asked them to send in the soil that the crops grew in, so top 10 centimeters, 4 inches, underneath each carrot that gets pulled, and the next 4 inches. So soil at multiple depths in triplicate, with the crops in triplicate, and then we asked 50 management questions. What was the variety? Where did you buy it? When did you plant? How did you prepare the soil? What did you do last year? What was your fertility program? Did you inoculate? Did you side dress? Did you irrigate? How often? With what? What was the weather? As many environmental conditions as we could. Basic stuff that farmers would know. So causal dynamics, environmental conditions, soil metrics, nutrient levels. That was just 6 crops that year. 2020, we set up our first lab in Europe. We got up to almost 25 crops that year. We had hundreds of farms, dozens of crops. You can see here the nutrients we were looking at in the food. This is our preliminary work. This is not like what we would do if we had a bunch of money. This was what we did because we were a small nonprofit running on charitable donations, trying to answer some basic questions. So there's only like 15 things we're looking at from nutrients. There's a bunch of stuff in the soil we're looking at. Every one of those green dots is a farm that was sending in the soil and the crops. And the management data, the orange ones, are what we call citizen scientists, people pulling stuff off the shelf. There's no soil or management data associated with that, but that's just like the supply chain, like what you get at the grocery store kind of thing. Over there, you can see the number of each one of the crops we looked at that year and the number of samples. This is just the 2020 data. All told, we had about 10,000 crop samples, 8,000 soil samples, 4 years, 2 continents, hundreds of farms. For anybody who knows anything about science, this is like a decent data set, right? Not small. Okay, so what are the basic things we found? So on the left, it says sulfur in carrot on top. On the bottom left, you can see 8.41. I'm not sure everybody can see that. 8.41 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight. On the right, it says 33.19. So that means that the one all the way over on the right, that little green one, had 33 milligrams per 100 grams of sulfur. The one on the left, 8.41. That's a 4-to-1 variation. You have to eat 4 of the ones on the left to get as much sulfur as you ate one of the ones on the right. 4x, 4-to-1. Not 4%, 4-to-1. The color says fifths of the range. So if all the way to the left is 0 and all the way to the right is 100, then the spot where the red and orange come together is 20, the orange and yellow is 40, 60, 80. So we're just trying to break it up into 5 equal sections so you can see roughly the shape of the curve. So this is a bell curve. Anybody who does science, this is a natural distribution. This is like a reasonable sized data set, 0, 20, 40, 60 samples you can see. So we can see the peak of the curve is in the 23rd percentile. Like it's a bell curve, but it's skewed to the left. That line where the yellow goes down in the middle, that's the 50th percentile. Basically what you're seeing there is most of the carrots that we found were below the 50th percentile of sulfur in what we could find, right? Does that all kind of make sense? People kind of following here? Yeah, okay. Sometimes looking at science graphs is not intuitive, so I want to make sure everybody gets it because it's not the way we learn to see stuff. Yes? I will try to project. You're welcome. I'll try to speak, I'm aiming this direction instead of that direction too. Because if I'm speaking that direction, it's got to get the... I saw one. It's plugged in. Should I try it? It's sitting here. No. I don't know. Okay. On the right, phosphorus. 11.7 is the lowest we found. 93.69 is the highest we found. That's an 8-to-1 variation. You'd have to eat 8 of the ones on the left to get as much as if you ate one of the ones on the right. Not 8%, 8-to-1. Anybody here go to college? A couple of us. High school? Mostly went to high school. Ever get grades? When I went to school, we had the same system all the way through after like kindergarten and, I don't know, first couple of grades. Any final grade that was in the 90s was considered to be an A of some sort. Anything in the 80s was a B. Anything in the 70s was a C. Anything in the 60s was a D. And anything below 60 was an F. People remember that. Basic thing. You got judged by how good of a person you were based on the letter you got, right? What a stupid system. The greens over there are the A's and B's, are the dark greens. The yellows, the light greens are the 60s and 70s. The reds, orange, and yellows is the 0 to 60. So if we were going to be grading ourselves as farmers based on the nutrient levels in our food, we're almost all failures. This is what we're finding. It's not the kind of thing that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, but it's facts. This is what we do science for, is to be honest with ourselves about what reality is. And if anybody cares about their children or the children of anybody else in town, it's actually, this matters. It really matters. I'm not even talking about nature and the environment and everything else, just our children. Antioxidants. People may have heard about antioxidants. Anybody heard about antioxidants? They're supposed to be good for you. Blueberries are supposed to have lots of antioxidants. Pomegranate, somebody got some good marketing. They said, man, pomegranates have lots of antioxidants. 4.92, 195. That's 40x. This one has 40 times as many antioxidants as that one. Peak of the curve in the 13th percentile. We found this with everything we looked at. I didn't say that. With all the crops we looked at, anybody who wants to go to our website, we've got all of the graphs, all the data, all the raw data, all the metadata, the causal data. We got this whole data explorer thing. Anybody can go and look at it. 20 other crops, roots, leaves, fruits, and grains. This preliminary work, we didn't do any animal products. We only looked at roots, leaves, fruits, and grains, which is like plant products, right? Oats and wheats and potatoes and polyphenols on the left, on the right. Polyphenols are those things that we call flavor. The things God gave us the machinery to test. When you say this tomato tastes better, that tomato doesn't taste as good, it's the flavor you're actually tasting. You're not tasting the phosphorus and the sulfur and the antioxidants. You're tasting these compounds. Some people call them plant secondary metabolites. Scientists call them terpenoids or alkaloids or phenolics. There's all kinds of fancy words for them. In the olden days, before the American Medical Association was invented, and people had like traditional wisdom about how to stay well, we talked about medicinal plants, herbs and spices and things that have very intense flavors and aromas. It's those things that we experience as flavor and aroma, which now there's lots of papers published in Nature and Science, like the premier scientific journals, which say those things shred cancer, diabetes, heart disease, osteoporosis, those chronic diseases, like the chemistry of chronic disease, the stuff that makes you fall apart like that, gets completely ripped apart by this stuff we call flavor. Literally, the more flavor in your food, natural, not synthetic, the more health-giving attribute. And that stuff only gets built in the plant when everything else is there. It's like a pyramid. You can't have the basic elements, you can't have the basic compounds until you get, like, to build these things called flavor, you have to have everything else present. So it's like a really good test. Your tongue can tell you if it's got flavor, lots of it, a bunch of other stuff is there. That's the way nature works. 2.34, 49.75, that's a 20 to 1 variation. Peak of the curve in the 7th percentile. The vast majority of the sample set, way more than half, is below the 20th percentile. Right? All the food we found. I think I made my point. I see a bunch of faces. Jesus. Whew. Everything we looked at, 2 continents, multiple years, organic, not organic, everything, this is what we found. So just so we're clear about nutrient variation, it sure looks like a real thing. I don't know why, but I guess we could have discussions about why. No one's really looked at this and actually tried to talk about it. Because actually, most people in the supply chain don't really have an incentive for anybody to know about this. Our thought is it's about we the people, not about the people in the supply chain. Okay, so what causes it? This is the G, genetics, the one on the left. On top it says Napoli, and then it says Bolero, and then it says Nantes, and it says Mokum, and then it says Romance. These are just carrots again. We got graphs like this for 20 other crops. This is just carrots. But what I see here is you can put a Napoli seed in this soil and get a low level of nutrients in the red zone, or I can put it in that soil and get a high level in the green zone. Same thing with Bolero, same thing with Nantes. What I'm seeing here is not that this genetic correlates with higher nutrient levels or that one correlates with lower nutrient levels. What I'm seeing is across the board, any genetic can have a high or low nutrient level. Doesn't seem like G is such a big deal. Climate region on the right. These are USDA climate regions. Every single sample that came in from a farm got stuck in a box in its USDA climate region. Northeast, east, north, central, southeast, central, northwest, west, southwest. A lot of the people who sent in samples were from the Northeast. That's where our organization started. That's where we had our biggest base. These are small, organic, cover cropping, permaculture, local farms who know they're better people. Out of 115 samples, we got 2 in the dark green. East, north, central, closer, right? 54 samples, 1 in the dark green. Okay, south. It doesn't look like soil type and climate zone correlates with nutrient levels. Looks like some people can do a good job anywhere, and most people are doing a bad job everywhere. Like you're in good company. The foundational point, here's one takeaway that's like you can have a silver lining, like there's icing on the cake. The bar is not high. The bar is not high, right? This is kind of exciting. Like it's not hard to be better than most people. Like you do a couple things different and you're looking really good until you look at what's possible. And then you're like, okay, this is where humility comes in. Humility is a big, powerful, positive thing that if we don't have it, I don't know, there's no reason to talk, right? Okay. Sample source. On top says farm. Next one says store. Next one says garden. Next one says farmer's market. Just because somebody is really nice and they're my neighbor does not mean that what I'm getting on Saturday morning at the farmer's market from them is particularly more nutritious. Again, the people who sent in these samples thought that these identities caused them to be better. They went out to the farmer's market, to their favorite farms, and bought the samples so they could say, look, my farmer is really good. Like if we had a bias in the people who were collecting samples, it was people who wanted small and local and organic and stuff to be better. Yeah, the best sample we found was from a store. Okay, on the right is the final one here. This is like if I haven't dropped enough bombs. Here's the one. Okay, it's not my phone, is it? I don't think. On top it says certified organic. Yeah, out of 131 samples, you get 2 in the dark green. You get a whole bunch more in the red. These are called violin graphs. For anybody who doesn't know statistics, a violin graph basically is like where it's fat is where the preponderance of the sample is. So you can see that the certified organic is definitely fattest in the top of the orange. And if orange is from 20 to 40, we'll call that 35 or so, or 40 out of 100 is where the vast majority of the organic sample sits. Yes?